Greetings! So today I wanted to explain why on earth I decided to do graphics development of Linux. Surprisingly to me, whenever I go online and talk to people and I mention that I'm doing computer graphics, like we start talking and so on, and then eventually I mention that I'm doing this on Linux and they start looking at me like I'm a weirdo because most people that do computer graphics use DirectX and they tend to do development on Windows because most people want to go into video game development, and since the market share for gaming on Linux is essentially non-existent, why on earth would you use Linux to develop anything related to graphics? Well, the reason for that is pretty simple. There's multiple layers to it. The first is I've been happily using Linux for a variety of years. I'm very comfortable with it. I really like it. My workflow is very tied to it. I don't really like Visual Studio, for example, which I had to use at multiple settings, including at my day job. It's clunky, it's big, it's not configurable to the level that I would like it to do. I am much more comfortable using a terminal and just typing commands one after the other. Like, I don't want to use my mouse to click on the little green arrow and wait for it to compile. I'd much rather just use the keyboard, launch it, and maybe run a couple of commands on the side while I'm waiting for it to compile. The other reason, and this one is a little bit more pragmatical, is Windows. If I were to be developing on Windows, Windows is much more closed of a platform than Linux is. By that I mean, if I develop everything and it works for Linux, I can more easily make it work on other stuff if I ever want to. So, for example, if I make it for Linux, it's going to run on mobile. Not one-to-one, some effort would need to be put, but it could run on mobile with a little extra effort since it's the same basic operating system. Whereas if I attach myself to all of the Windows API stuff, it's a lot more effort to try to port it into other platforms. In addition to that, and this is probably the most important, Linux is open source, and this is meant to be a research engine. And although unfortunately it doesn't really work this way anymore, research is meant to be democratic. Everybody is supposed to have access to the latest research within reason. Like, people shouldn't have nuclear reactors at their home if they just want to learn about nuclear physics. But graphics and programming is not going to threaten our existence to that level. So I do want to make it so that as much as I can possibly do it, this engine should be accessible for anybody. And so if I make it for Windows, well, what happens if you have a Mac? Or what happens if you have all the hardware and you don't have the money to pay a Windows license? Like, maybe you manage to scrap some pieces out of a junkyard and your machine would theoretically work, but you don't want to pay, or you don't have the money to pay for a Windows license. So on and so on and so on. So there are many reasons why somebody could eventually get access to cheap hardware, but not access to either Windows or Mac OS. So by making all of it on Linux, I can make it more accessible to people. It's easier for people that may not have the means for a license to get it. And vice versa, if you have a Windows machine, well, I know that it may be a pain in the ass, I know that a lot of people are not willing to do it, but if they had the motivation, they could dual boot, or they could just get an old machine and install Linux on it, and things are gonna work. So I do feel that by using Linux as a development platform, I make this engine more accessible without having to put on myself all the burden of making sure that it compiles on multiple platforms, and making sure, that if I am running for this target, then I have all the if defs for one target, and if I have another target, I have to do all of the if defs for another target. And sometimes the underlying graphics API isn't even there, so I couldn't even just rely on doing everything with Vulkan. Now I need to check, well, is Vulkan available? If it isn't, then switch to DirectX, switch to Metal, so on and so on and so on, which is a lot of work and is more engineering type of work. And I already do engineering type of work all day long, and this isn't about that. This is more about the providing algorithms and stuff like that. I don't want to spend a lot of time of energy as a single dev just trying to make my stuff run everywhere, because then I'm never going to get the cool stuff done. So yeah, that is my justification for why I am doing graphics development on Linux. And you know what? I really like it. I haven't had any problems. Stuff works for me just fine. And a little bit unrelated, but like even when I'm gaming, I actually game on Linux. Valve has done a terrific job with their Proton technology, so you can actually run AAA games and they run just fine most of the time. I beat Sekiro a couple of months ago, like from beginning to end, no issues. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you guys don't think I am an apostate anymore, or if you do, I guess that's fine. I'm still going to be developing on Linux. And if you can, please give it a like and a subscribe, because that will really help me out in the long term. Bye bye!